Okay, let's go into, so that's spindle work basically. So now, let's go through the final cuts. Everybody shows you how to, throw these wet ribbons and make bowls and everything, but do they ever show you how to do the final cuts? So let's take some dry wood and let's learn how to use some of these tools in making final cuts, so that we don't have to sand. I mean, well, you do have to sand, but isn't it nicer to start at like 400 and 800 and be done? Come on. Okay.
Mark, what grid is your little stone that you were taking the burr off?
Oh, that's 600. All you're doing, does anybody know about like a butcher knife? When a butcher knife gets dull, all the little fibers on the end of it look like this. They splay both ways. So if a butcher takes a steel, right, and he goes like this down that steel, what he's doing, he's lining all those little burrs, those little fibers on the end one way. That's all we want to do. You can take a burnishing rod, it rolls that little burr up. Right? You're just trying to put all those burrs one way, then it cuts clean. Okay. Let's do this here. This is a little piece of dry cherry. Let me see if I've got a... Tell you what, let me just use the other chuck and I'll be done. How many people do side grain bowls? How many people do end grain bowls? Okay. You know what's interesting, when you have nice spalted wood, right, having all that spalting come up around the edge of the bowl, it's gorgeous. Right. Anybody has any questions, shout them out. I was putting I'm getting old, so I gotta talk to myself a little bit. And again, what I'm showing you is what I do. There's 1,000 ways to do things, but I personally don't like to spend a lot of time sanding. It just creates a lot of dust and havoc. And if you can just remember not to move your arms or your hands, right? Just to let your body do the work, and all your job is as a wood turner, right? There's no physical effort here, right? What you're doing, this is the motor putting all the energy in, and I've got my tool. All I'm doing is holding and guiding that farmer's plow. That's all I'm doing. And if I don't keep it on that bevel for support, the reason there's a straight board on the side of that farmer's plow, that stays up against the earth and he can make a straight furrow. If he puts it sideways, he's going to kill the horse and it's not going to be a pretty furrow. Same thing in wood turning. Because all these are basically little farmer's plows or handheld drills. And if you try to jam a drill press, it jams. Right? And it reacts. If you just allow it to feed itself, it feeds itself. Just allow the tool to feed. The motor's going to give you all the energy. So I'm going to reduce you, instead of being wood turners, you're going to be holders and guiders of tools. Let them do the work. Alrighty, we've got an end grain situation here. In an end grain situation, I always put a tenon on. We have several choices. On end grain, right? What would you round this with? What would you bring it to round with? What? What? Okay, this is a spindle, isn't it? It's a spindle. The grain is running this way. So we have some choices, right? We can use a B-gang, right? Lay it on the bevel, engage it. And it's really quick. We have a spindle roughing gouge, don't we? Because it's a spindle, right? So we can do this. See that? And it works. We can use a bowl gouge. Right? We can push a bowl gouge down there. Whoop. It didn't sound good. Okay, so now we have this thing basically round. We've got choices. So the first thing I like to do is when I teach my students this. Okay, this bowl is now rounded. And we usually get a magic marker. Okay, so there's my do not touch line. My students in my shop are not allowed to touch this line until after the bowl is finished. What's the reason for it?
Tear out? It would be tear out, or you want to have some edge around?
No. It's because students do this. Then they cut after cut after cut, and they wind up with a bowl this big. So the first thing we do is we make the do not touch line, and we get the full use of our wood. The second thing we always do is make either a tenon or a recess. So this is an end grain piece, so I'm going to make a tenon, because I can then crush fibers in that jaw and it's going to be stable. So now I'm going to parallel, right, the bottom of the bowl with the bevel. I'm going to drop my handle down at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to cant the bowl gouge at a 45, right? And I'm going to take a tiny cut, and I'm going to do what? I'm just going to slowly lean in and let the tool do the work. All right, see that? I'll make one more. Now what I'm going to show you is critical. All right? When this tenon gets mounted in this jaw, it's this front wall that rubs against that front face that gives you the security. This happens to have a 90-degree situation in the one-way chuck. It's not some of you folks have a little dovetail, so you have to make it a dovetail. In this case, I've got to make this 90 degrees. So now I'm going to parallel my bevel along this plane, put it on here, and as I push the tool in, right, I'm going to watch the top, watch that cut line, and I'm going to make the tool go at 90 degrees. And when I get to the end, I'm going to do what? I'm going to roll the gouge all the way over and close it. By doing that, if the camera can see that, I've gotten rid of that little round ridge in there, because if that little round ridge, the jaw goes on that, then it won't get tight up against that front face. So now I have the do not touch line, I have my tenon, so now I say, where's the bottom of the bowl going to be? Let's see, I want the bottom of the bowl to be there. So there's the bottom of my bowl. Now, instead of, if I start shaping this first without making the tenon first, then when I make the tenon, I gotta go back and reshape it because it changes the shape. I just want to shape one time. So now my shape of my bowl is going to be between here and here. Okay? Now, let's just do some, we'll do some different final cuts here. Let's take a bowl gouge. All right? I'm going to slow this down a little bit so we don't get burned. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm down at a 45, and this is Canada to 45. All right, we're going to rub the bevel. All right, we're going to start that, and then as I come around, this is a big bead, so I have to do what? I have to raise the handle and take the tool to the center of rotation. Now, does anybody want to come up and check this cut? No torn fibers. Let's take a roughing gouge. It's actually a much better cut. It's much smoother. You just make that again. My tool rest was right just a little bit. I'll make it. Another thing you should do before you make the final cut is always resharpen the tool. Okay, now does anybody want to look at that cut? Come up and feel it? You're always welcome to come up here. It's even finer. There's no tear out whatsoever. Skew. Okay, I'm not coming in. There's the tool rest up a little bit. But the skew, we're doing the same thing with our tool. We're putting the blade in the line of rotation. Somebody in this room didn't turn their phone off.
We won't kick that person out of the class.
Okay? But my favorite tool is the bowl gouge. With this type of configuration on the flute. Oop, there we go. See that? Let me put it there in my hand. See that? Got two, I've taken the inside of the flute out, and I've made two little wings on the side. Because I like to work my tools with my body, all right? And the only way that I can match that, the skew, a lot of people have a lot of problems with it because if they roll that over and violate that east-west rule, it's a violent catch. Absolute violent catch. Now I can do the same thing. I can turn a bowl gouge up like this. See, I can do, let me put this handle on the other side. See, I can put the bowl gouge up like this. You get the same cut, acting like a skew, but it's very, 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 very awkward, right? It's very awkward to be down, way down here for me. I like to have everything where I can use my hips. So if I do this, Dan, can you see that? I'm going to take the flute right, that little razor blade flute, right, and I'm going to touch it to the wood so I have bevel support. Now, you can actually hear it, it's like a razor blade. I've got total control. And you can see it's just clean and shiny. And the only time you ever take that tool out of the drawer is when you need to make the final cut. Okay, another thing you'll notice that I was doing. My cuts were from where? On an end grain bowl, the outside cut goes from the rim to the base. Or if it's on a hollow form, it goes from the apex, the widest point, down to the base, either way. All right, we're not going to spend all night on this stuff. What we're doing is doing technical tools. All right. So you have a variety of tools that work. It's just what you become comfortable with. So now we've got to hollow this thing out. What tool are we going to use to hollow it out?
Spindle gouge.
Spindle gouge, we can use a spindle gouge. We can use a bowl gouge. All right. Most people are going to start out with a bowl gouge, so we'll start out with a bowl gouge. Now, where does the final cut have to be? From the inside to the rim on an end grain bowl. Or you tear the fibers. The first thing I'm going to do when I put this on here is I'm going to straighten up the rim. What's the second cut I make on a bowl? Always, always, always. What?
The edge.
Right, the safety cut. Safety cut is always number 2. After you establish your rim, then you always round off that sharp edge. Now if you hit it, it's not a deli slicer blade. I've got a couple scars to prove it. I overlearned. Okay.
And that was another reason for your line, right? I mean, that kind of that, do not go past line, you kind of went to that going the other direction now. The line you drew for the...
That's just to maintain the diameter. Right?
So that left, what I'm saying, but you kind of used it the other way.
Right. Well, I'm just trying to, round it off here. But I made my straightening cut first to make sure that I've got a straight rim all the way around. And then I'm going to make my safety cut. And the third thing I'm going to do is I'm going to establish how thick do I want the wall of this bowl to be. So, let's see, I'm going to, let's just say tonight we aren't going to make a complete bowl. What we're going to do is we're just going to show some cuts. But let's say I want it that thick. Okay? So now I establish that. I now know that. Okay? Then the next thing I do, I'll lower this just a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drill into the center. With the center of the tool in the middle, right? And I'm going to drill in, just push it straight in the center. I'm going to drill in, and I'm just going to pull it back. Just rotate. I'm going to drill and pull. Drill and pull. Drill. Okay, so I've done a rough cut with the bowl gouge. I could take a cut this way, see? it's going against the grain. I could take it this way. But now when it comes to the final cut, I can't do that cut. Because if I do that cut and we look at this cherry, we look at it close, we can feel that it's rough because we went up the broom straws. See, so that's rough. I couldn't live with that. So, to finish the inside of an end grain bowl, we're going to have to make our final cut from here all the way up to here. If I have a bowl gouge that has a fairly shallow grind on it like this, it's not a steep grind, it's a shallow grind, then I'm going to have to bring the tool way over here, right? Put it in, let me lower that just a little bit. So I like to work up about a 10 o'clock angle or so. All right, so now we can come in here. I'm going to touch the center. And remember, I can't pull my left hand. If I pull my left hand, I'm going to what? Get lines on my work. So we can only push the tool. So we get back in, we slowly push the tool. We push and steer. Now, anybody like to come up and feel this? Seriously, anybody can come up here and feel it? You can check me out. Right, so now we have no torn fiber. It's clean, but that's not my favorite tool to do the inside of an end grain bowl because the flute on this bowl gouge is deep, and when I'm touching the inside bottom of the flute, then this is sort of comes out at right angles, and that's on the advancing side, and it's a little bit more of a scrape than I want. I want more of a slice. So what tool do we have in our toolbox that will give us a vertical slice? We have a spindle gouge. But if you can see, I've put a secondary bevel on it. Can you see that? Now the way we do this, and this spindle gouge does not have a hollow grind. It has a right angle grind to the surface, so there's no curve from the wheel. The way you do this is very simple. We're going to get rid of the back of the gouge. If I want to have a 45-degree angle out here, then I drop the handle to 45 degrees. If I want to have it a 30-degree angle, I drop it down like this. I lay the flutes over my finger, bring them up to the wheel, right? I'm going to take the lower part of this, on this side of the flute here, I'm going to touch it to the wheel. I'm going to keep the angle that I have. I'm just going to roll it. Now I have my secondary, I don't know if you can see that or not. Can you see that? So now the spindle gouge, instead of coming out sideways like a bowl gouge does, it has a very shallow angle, doesn't it? So now if I align that with the rotation of the wood, when I align that to the rotation of the wood, right, then the wood is almost perfectly in line with that blade. And isn't that what we're trying to do for wood slicing? We don't want it to hit it sideways. So now, again, I'm going to come in here, right? I'll get that little center divot out. Okay, and remember, we're not going to pull with our left hand. We're going to push with our right hand and our body. So we get this as tight as we can, drop down, push it up towards 10 o'clock, and just hold it. The ribbon will never stop. And if it takes me 5 minutes to make this cut, saves me 3 hours of sanding. I got in a little deep and I created some nervous lines here. Let's see if I can take a hairier cut. Now, does anybody want to check that out? That's unbelievable. All right, now I'm going to show you something that's very important, and don't forget this. All right, people have seen this before, they've seen me. If I lay a piece of sandpaper in here, what does it do? It crinkles, doesn't it? So it's like a lady's high heel shoe. Those parts that touch that are crinkled up are applying more pressure than the pieces that are folded up. So if I sand with 5,000 grit, and I do it this way, I'm putting pressure points, and I'm always putting lines in my work when I'm sanding. So the way you get around that is very simple. It's called scissors. All right? So what you do is you just cut a V in your sandpaper. Now, when you lay your sandpaper in, see that where the V's overlap? They change shape as the curve changes. See that? And it conforms to the curve. It's like making darts in clothing. So now when I'm sanding at 220, I get 220 and I don't have the pressure lines. I never use a power sander. I only sand by hand. Because power sanders, to me, have a tendency to lurch and do that. And they put lines, the swirl lines, the wrong way on the grain. And they're just a pain. Right? So just remember that. Right? When you're sanding, make a V, right? And come back out. No matter what the curve is, the paper changes to conform to the curve. Keep you from having pressure lines. All right, let's go to side grain. I'll pass this around.
Mark, if you were undercutting that bowl right at the lip, would you go to a little steeper angle on your tool?
I know if this was, no, I'd actually go to a shallower, I want a shallower angle so I could reach up under there. If it was a steeper angle, then I'd have to have the handle up like this.
A blunter angle.
Yeah, I want a less blunt angle. Right, now, if this is a deep bowl, then I have to change this angle here to maybe 70 degrees to get all the way down into the bottom to come across. Because here, I'm going to get to a certain point and hit the edge of the rim. But I'll pass around those two unsanded cuts on the outside of a dry bowl, right? And you can start to appreciate what I teach about wood slicing in my shop. The object is never to tear grain and let the tool do the work for you. Let's go to side grain.